Hello, my name is Donsuk Lee, and I'm a PhD student in Building a Mind Lab at Indiana University. Today I would like to tell you about our work on modeling object recognition in newborn chicks using deep neural networks. We introduced an experimental framework for linking biological intelligence to artificial intelligence. We raised chicks in strictly controlled environments to study how early visual experience shapes object recognition in newborn brains. Then we virtually recreate the environment to provide the same training data to computational models, so that we can directly compare the learning in biological and artificial brains. In this work, we trained deep neural networks using the same visual experience as newborn chicks, and tested whether the representations learned by deep neural networks could predict object recognition behavior of the chicks. We did this by combining deep neural networks with cognitive models. One of the most important questions in psychology, cognitive science, neuroscience, and artificial intelligence concerns the origins and computational basis of object recognition. In recent years, researchers have made great progress understanding mechanisms underlying object recognition in adult brains. Many studies have used deep neural networks as models of biological visual systems. The representations learned by deep neural network models could accurately predict the behavioral and neural responses in the brain's visual system. However, unlike biological brains, which learn largely through unsupervised learning, these deep neural network models rely heavily on image labels to understand the visual world. They were typically trained to predict object names in a supervised manner on large-scale image datasets. More recently, researchers have made significant progress developing unsupervised learning algorithms. These algorithms leverage self-supervised tasks, such as reconstructing the original inputs or contrasting similar and dissimilar images to learn useful representations. Even without class labels, these algorithms could learn good representations that are useful for solving challenging object recognition tasks. Moreover, unsupervised DNN models could achieve neural prediction accuracy in multiple areas of ventral visual stream that parallel supervised methods. These methods produce brain-like representations even when trained solely on head-mounted camera data collected from young children. This suggests that unsupervised DNNs can serve as computational models of learning in developing brains. To understand the origins of object recognition, it is crucial to understand how newborn brains learn to recognize objects. However, there are two major barriers in building computational models of object recognition in newborn brains. First, newborn subjects are hard to study. Most methods for studying development in newborn subjects are low-powered and produce noisy measurements of behavior. This makes it challenging to obtain the precise benchmarks needed to build accurate computational models. Second, it is not possible to control the environment in which most newborn animals are raised. Thus, for most animals, we do not know which visual experiences were used to train their visual system during development. Training data plays a central role in shaping both biological and artificial intelligence. And if we want to directly compare how biological and artificial brains learn, we need to give them the same set of training data. In order to overcome these barriers, we use automated control rearing studies of newborn chicks. Newborn chicks are moved to a control rearing chamber right after hatching. The only objects that the chicks could see are the virtual objects projected on the monitors placed on the walls of the chamber. So we have complete control over the chicks' visual experiences with objects. We can also obtain highly precise behavioral benchmarks by automating our data collection. We use chicks as model systems because they are uniquely suited for studying the earliest stages of visual development. Chicks are mobile on the first day of life, require no parental care, and can be raised in strictly controlled environments immediately after hatching. Using automated control rearing method, we have explored how newborn chicks develop view-invariant object recognition. We raise chicks in chambers containing a single virtual object, moving through a limited viewpoint range. 2 weeks after birth, we presented the familiar object and an unfamiliar object simultaneously. Then we tested whether the chicks could recognize the familiar object across novel viewpoints. And here's the data from one of our experiments. At the top, you can see the viewpoint range of the object that the chicks were raised with. And below that, you can see pairs of the familiar and unfamiliar objects that were presented to the chicks during the test phase. The bars show the frequency of choices made by the chicks between each pair of objects. As you can see, generalization was quite impressive. On all 12 viewpoints, chicks were able to successfully recognize the familiar object. In order to model the object recognition behavior of newborn chicks, we combined deep neural networks with cognitive models of categorization. Specifically, instead of using hand-designed features for the input stimulus, we use feature representations derived from deep neural networks as inputs to cognitive models of categorization. This way, we can test whether DNNs learn object representations in the same way as newborn chicks. If they do, then the representation from DNNs should be useful for predicting the chick's behavior. We focused on unsupervised DNNs because object representations in newborn brains are shaped largely through unsupervised learning. To do this, we modified the cognitive modeling approach for traditional two-way categorization task. In a typical two-way categorization task, a subject first observes examples from two object categories. Then the subject receives a previously unseen example from one of the two categories, and the subject is then asked which one of the two categories it belongs to. To model categorization behavior, cognitive models predict the probability of choosing the correct category by comparing the similarities between the learned categories and the input stimulus. The task given to the newborn chicks are slightly different. But we can apply the ideas from the traditional categorization tasks. In our modified task setting, a newborn chick receives examples from only a single object category. And the examples of the second category are not provided during the input phase. During each test trial, the chick is then shown a pair of test stimuli. One from the familiar category, another from unfamiliar category. And then the task is to decide which of the two test stimuli belongs to the same category as the previously learned examples. Then we model the probability that the subject chooses the correct stimulus by comparing the similarity of the positive stimulus to the familiar category and the similarity of the negative stimulus to the category. In cognitive science, there are two types of categorization models depending on how categories are represented in these models. First, prototype theory assumes that a category is learned by forming an abstract concept of the category, which usually is an average of the observed examples. In a prototype model, the similarity is a function of distance between an input stimulus and the category prototype. On the other hand, exemplar theory assumes that a category is learned by remembering all the observed examples. In an exemplar model, The similarity function considers all of the distances between the stimulus and each exemplar. Next, I will discuss how we train deep neural network feature extractors. In order to mimic the visual experiences of the chicks, we created a virtual counterpart of the control rearing chambers using Unity game engine. Then we constructed an image dataset by recording visual observations of an agent that moved randomly within the virtual control rearing chamber. After recording, we programmatically filtered out the images which do not contain any objects. As a result, the image dataset consisted of objects in various viewpoints and scales. The resulting dataset was used to train deep neural network feature extractors with unsupervised objective functions. In particular, we use a contrastive learning method named SimClear, which is one of the state-of-art unsupervised learning algorithms, and an unsupervised generative method named BetaBAE, which encourages learning disentangled features. We extracted features for category examples and pairs of test stimuli using unsupervised DNNs, and provided them as inputs to either prototype or exemplar model. The categorization models predicted probability of choosing the correct stimulus using the rule as described before. We fitted categorization model by maximizing the log likelihood of the observed behavioral data. To evaluate how well unsupervised feature representations can predict the chick's object recognition behavior, we introduced two baselines. First, the untrained features were extracted from a randomly initialized ResNet 18 encoder. Second, the supervised features were extracted from a ResNet trained with the same images as unsupervised feature extractors, but with ground truth category labels. Let's take a look at the results. First, we compared the average negative log likelihood score of all models. The results show that prototype and exemplar models mostly produce similar results. The untrained features resulted in the worst fit, and the supervised feature produced the best fit out of all feature representations. And the SimClear features perform similar to the supervised features, with only a small difference in negative log likelihood score compared to the supervised features. In order to see how the DNN features can account for the variance in chicks' behavior, we also measure the correlation between the model prediction and the actual behavioral responses of the chicks across test conditions. Notably, exemplar models using unsupervised features achieved higher correlation score than the models with supervised features. This implies that these unsupervised features can outperform the supervised features in accounting for variance in newborn chicks' categorization behavior. This becomes more clear when we display the task accuracies predicted by the models and the actual accuracies of the newborn chicks across 6 experiments from our control rearing study. In these charts, the model predictions are drawn in blue, and the average performance of the chicks are drawn in black. The supervised features often overestimated the chicks' performance because the supervised encoder learned highly discriminative features. On the other hand, unsupervised features mostly underestimated the chicks' performance, but could better capture their confusion patterns. This is demonstrated by more similar shapes of the blue and black lines in the last two plots compared to the first two plots. In conclusion, we introduced a new experimental framework for linking control rearing studies to DNN models. Using this framework, we show that features derived from unsupervised DNNs make competitive predictions about chicks' behavior compared to the supervised features. In the future, we hope to test additional benchmarks and models to reverse engineer the origins of object recognition using this framework. Thank you so much for your time, and if you are interested in learning more about our research, feel free to send me an email or visit our website at buildingamind.com.